My name is George Lukes. I work for Utah Department of Transportation. I am the State Design and Standards Engineer. This morning we've got UDOT-U, and it is cost-based estimating at UDOT, what you need to know to leverage it on your projects. This is not just the estimating for the beginning of the project, but it's kind of how you use cost-based estimating throughout the project. We're going to look at what cost-based estimating is, why you use it on your projects, and when you do use it on your projects, how you leverage it, who's going to help you leverage it. So what is cost-based estimating? And I just wanted to ask everyone, is everyone aware of at least the two different methods we use here at UDOT? We use average unit bid for some things and cost-based estimating. Does everyone know what the difference between that is? The difference between average unit bid and cost-based is we have all of the projects that we've bid for a certain number of years. And basically, with those, we have the ability to go back and take the average of those bids. Cost-based is where you're doing it a little bit different, where you're looking at how a contractor would bid the contract. So what they're basically looking at is the up-to-date construction costs. This is the labor rates. They're looking at the equipment rates. They're looking at the materials and the profit and overhead. They're bidding it as if they were getting the fair market value for UDOT. They're also looking at equipment types and the production rates that go along with the equipment. How fast you can haul it, how fast you've got your routes, your access, and things of that nature. Talk about the crew configurations, how many men, how many supervisors, what those rates are, and then how fast you can construct it. We're going to go into a lot more detail about this kind of stuff coming up, but this is kind of an overview of what we're going to talk about today. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was, why do we use cost-based estimating? When we look at the average unit bid prices, there's a number of reasons why there can be some issues with those numbers. One is, we may have a season where contractors are full and they're bidding projects and they're bidding higher just because they have to use crews that are not within their own company, or they have to use equipment that they're renting or something like that. So there's a number of reasons why it might be different from average unit bid costs. So we've got Contractor Perspective of looking at those and trying to get the best fair market value cost for those projects. We have a higher confidence because one of the things that I typically look at is when we're looking at the Salt Lake Valley, some of the four major contractors are in the corners of the valley, and so the location of the project may be a little bit different of where we would look at that as well. Some of the other things are the risks and opportunities that we'll look at, the negotiation support in the construction phase of knowing what the production rates are, knowing what the labor rates are, knowing what that was bid at originally. We also have, the way we look at it is, if we've got better design and better estimates, then we're going to have all of the best contractors on our jobs, and that's what we want. Another thing we look at is constructability. It's both how the project's going to be built, but also, again, looking at equipment rates, and when I say that, they're production rates, also the equipment rates, labor rates, and things of that nature. And then finally, with our bid award reviews, what we do is we look and see, does the number on that line item look reasonable? And it gives us the opportunity to go back and ask our designers if maybe they want to recheck their calculations or something to make sure we've got the right numbers. In 2012, we have added quite a bit of value to the department by doing this. If you look at this graph right here, what we've got is about, I think we're around $13 million of savings. In the design phase, it's been about $11 million. And essentially what that's doing is looking at that design and making sure that we've got the right estimate on there. It gives us an ability to be more efficient with our funds. Really quickly, a couple of years ago, we were at about 65% of our award value, which means that we've got 35% of the money still sitting in the projects. If we can use that money to build other projects, we're a lot more efficient. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris and Abdi, and these guys will talk a little bit more about how we do it here at UDOT.
I'm Chris Wilson with UDOT Estimate Support, Contract Employee, Lead Cost Estimator. So what I'm going to talk about is a little bit of the contractor perspective. Some of the things that a contractor will bring to the table is that experience of actually constructing the project. Okay, they have to look through every little aspect in order to make money. Okay, the contractors are there as a business. UDOT or any other agencies are there as an owner, purchasing a project essentially, right? So it's a little bit of a different perspective. Okay, the contractor, he's got in his mind what crews he's going to use, how many men, what kind of equipment. You know, he's got to make a profit when he bids these projects that are designed by UDOT and put out. Number one, he's got to beat the competition in order to make a profit, right? So he has to look at all of those things that will give him an edge on the competition. All right, he's got to look at not only how much time it's going to take him to construct the project, but also scheduling the crews that are going to be available, as well as equipment. Like George talked about, knowing those equipment rates, production rates, that all takes into account the schedule and the usage of those types of resources that the contractors have. And they also will take into consideration innovations to give them an edge or to increase their profit margin. And one of the biggest things that we like to talk about as contractors is the risk that is involved in the project. Okay, a higher risk project is going to constitute a higher margin. Okay, there's a higher chance of losing money as well as, you know, making money. Okay, next slide. And so this perspective of the contractor is going to help us to really narrow in those costs. So rather than looking at this cost and this cost on these projects over in the valley like George was talking about, or even way down in St. George or Moab, okay, you're almost taking a shotgun blast of all these different projects and narrowing it in with a sniper rifle. You know, you have a really narrow scope, okay, and one target. Okay. This can be applied all the way back into concept. If any of you guys have worked with concept estimates, you know that you have contingency on that original amount, okay? And then you have inflation on that amount. So if your original cost is close, then your contingencies and your inflations are going to be closer. So after contingencies, you have kind of that scoping and then your plan in hand stage, where you're really narrowing down how you're going to build the project. And with those costs being accurate and a little bit more dependable, then you can make design decisions. Okay, is it going to benefit us to do concrete or asphalt? Or, because we just learned a couple days ago that asphalt has dropped to $500 a ton rather than the $700 to $750 a ton. And to take that into account is huge. We missed one project, and we bid the asphalt at $65 a ton. It came in at $49 just because of that quick change. Now in historical estimating, it would take maybe five to 6 months to really look at those and take that into account into our average bid, because it could have been just a fluke. But because we saw that in our award reviews, we were able to investigate and see why that happened on the next day. In fact, we made calls that night to make those decisions on subsequent projects. Okay. So when you have that accurate estimate that what the project's going to cost in real time, then your project fundings are better utilized, better funded. You're not, like George said, you're not leaving that 35% of the money in projects for a year or maybe two. Okay? So this graph is going to show us what the difference between historical estimating and cost estimating is going to help us with. Okay? In 2008, we were still using historical estimating, right? And 2009, 2010, the market was dropping dramatically. 2008 was a high point, okay, in the economy, and the end of 2008, things started to drop dramatically. Okay? So through 2008, 2009, 2010, the economy was dropping, and so all the designers and programmers were afraid that their projects were going to go over, and so then they started pumping more money into the projects. A little, what's the word? Kind of just false, blind trust that the projects were going to go way under, and so we were leaving that much money on the table. 24% of $1 billion is a lot of money to be sitting in projects. And so when 2011, 2012, when we started to really track those costs, we were able to squeeze that number of that money left on the table to below 10%, which is a huge improvement. So this next slide shows us the trend in costs. And this is from like asphalt and concrete and just kind of the major bid items that UDOT tracks. And you can see through 2003 to 2008 that the costs were going up, and 22%. If you don't have 22% contingency in your project, you're not going to be able to award it, right? You're going to have to go to the project manager, or the project manager's going to have to go to his bosses and cry for more money, and that's never fun. Then you have to go to commission, and they're always asking, well, why the crap didn't you figure that out? So, and then the opposite happened in 2009 through 2010. We were leaving all that money on the table, and then it started going up again. Okay. So this graph shows both the inconsistency of the market as well as the loss of funds when it's left on the table. So as that contractor experience is injected into your projects, one of the biggest things, like I talked about before, is the risk and opportunity. This is where UDOT can really benefit, okay, from that contractor experience. The risk and opportunities in these projects can be huge. Some of those things that we've investigated over the years is like the ABC bridge construction, accelerated bridge construction, right? These new ideas and new innovations. At first the ABC bridge construction was really high, and as the contractors have gotten used to it, the numbers have come down dramatically. And not only are we building the bridges for the same price or even cheaper, we're getting them done twice as fast, and the public is seeing huge drops in delay time. Okay, and the risks in those projects, as the designers and REs and consultants all work together to reduce those risks in the project, the less money that UDOT's paying for things that may or may not happen. And then George talked about this negotiation support. I don't know how many of you guys have been involved in CMGC projects or CMAR projects, but this is where the contractor is involved early on design by an RFP. Okay, they're selected on the best value. The most qualified contractors for that project are brought on, okay, to help the design and the designers and the owners work through all of these problems. They identify risk. They provide these cost estimates to help support, the design decisions, okay? And they bring out those innovations that, hey, maybe if you do this, then it will cost less and we'll get it done faster. Okay? So in that environment, there's a lot of negotiation going on. The designer thinks it should happen one way, the contractors decide in this other way, and so they look through all of the options, they do all the investigation that they need to do, and they come up with the best idea, okay, the best decision. And it's the same without CMGC, hopefully, is when you work with those experienced contractors available to you, then they can help you make some of those design decisions, right? And as you work forward in construction, hopefully by working through a lot of those in the design phase, you eliminate some or hopefully all of the change orders. There's always going to be change orders, but when you do have a change order, if you have an accurate cost, not based on average unit bid prices that from a project, in Nephi or St. George or up in Logan or in Salt Lake, you have an accurate cost to negotiate with your contractor. And if the RE can go to the table with those costs, then he's going to be able to negotiate a better cost or a fair market cost for that change order. Okay, so the contractor's making no more, no less. And the contractors, George always gives the example of going to the bank and saying, well, bank, will you give me 20% interest on my money? If they say yeah, well, of course you're going to take it, Right? So the contractors, if they're going to come and ask UDOT for 20% markup on top of the cost, and we give it to them, and if we don't know any better, we're going to say, yeah, and the contractor's going to say, all right? So having those accurate costs are going to help us to be more prepared when we go into negotiations with the contractors. Contractors, if they know that UDOT has a good design, that's less risk to them. Okay? If there's not quantity busts or they're missing underground utilities somewhere, okay? The contractor is going to be better able to provide more accurate costs in their bid. Okay? Then the community, the contractor community, is going to be talking. We've already heard them talk. Okay? They're grateful for the designers and the UDOT teams working together to be able to come up with that fairness in the market. Okay? One contractor's not getting treated differently and not making more money than they should. When Abdi or I do the award reviews, we'll catch some things, and the contractors, just knowing that, have said that it gives them so much more confidence to give an accurate number because they know they're not going to get played or lose to a dishonest contractor. Not that the contractors are dishonest. So when change orders are negotiated, one contractor isn't getting treated fairly because they know that there's that knowledge in the department, and the REs are going to be negotiating a fair market price for their change orders.
My name is Abdi Fatemi. I'm a contract employee for UDOT Estimate Support. I have almost 40 years experience in contracting, working with several contractors in the state of Utah. This project, the 5,400 sod reconstruction cost saving you see there, is a very good example of what the cost-based estimating can do for you. This project was designed for temporary building, a band-aid we call it, to widening the shoulders and mill and pave and chip seal the project by 2-3 years of life for that road. We've been asked to review the project and the constructability on that project. We offered the department to, let's change the design. With the money we have, let's do the cost-based estimating as what the contractor is going to bid this project, what the price is going to come. And we got with the design team in Region 2, and they completely changed the design. After we done the cost estimating, we come up with the cost of approximately $6 million or so. With all the other contingency, the budget for the project was around $8 million. We changed the whole project from the Band-Aid to full reconstruction. The full reconstruction was excavating the road for almost 23-inch, put the granule borrow, road base, pave it, widen the road. We've been able to change that project from that to full reconstruction with the addition of $200,000, which they loved the idea. We done it. The design was complete, was advertised. We were lucky or good or whatever you want to call it. The price came back right there where we said it's going to be. Now you see the saving there, $12.9 million to $6 million. If we were doing the Band-Aid, that means 2 years later we have to do the same thing again. 2 years later you got to do the same thing again. Look at the public. Public is going to say, what are you doing? You just closed that 2 years ago. You're doing it again. So doing the cost-based estimating and look at the actual cost and not using the average prices, what the market was, we've been able to change this project and come up with a better road. It's going to have a life of 5 to 10 years, and the saving is there. The maintenance is not there. So that's what the cost-based estimating do for you. There you go. This is my favorite. I built a few roads like that. I got to the middle of the job and I said, now what? What are you going to do? It is very important to do your constructability review when you're doing your design. When the contractors look at the project, the first thing they do, they look at that plans, read the specs, and they set up a field visit. They go to the job site, they look at it. You're saying is the 5 trees to move? They go look at it and see if there is a 5 tree there. So every single item is important. Doesn't matter, is it $5,000 or is it $1 million item. They look at their schedule, they look at the equipment, they look at the production, they consider the risk, and when they get all this stuff done, they come back to the office and create a team to do a complete takeoff. They go to each item and look at the plans and do the takeoff. And make sure the quantity you put in there is accurate, is up and down. We're not going to go there how they take advantage of it, but they do. There is a possibility of the overrun, underrun. Why you want to put your money in the item is going to underrun. You're going to lose your money. Put it in the item is going to overrun. They look at, is that really can be built the way they design it? You design the project, it looks good. I'll give you an example. It was a road, a two-way road. The designer designed it, excavate one side, full reconstruction, use the excavation material in an embankment. That's very normal. Except put it in the embankment. But if you cannot put it in the embankment because the traffic is right there, what's going to happen? The project completely changed. The contractor bid the job, excavated, and stand there and said, what do you want me to do with this material? Oh, you have to haul it off. So they haul off the material. Then they go to the next side. They're going to say, where are you going to use the borrow? There is no item for the borrow. So it's very important to look at it. It's not just X to embankment. You got to make sure where you're going is going to go. You got to check your quantities to make sure your unit of measure is right. We had the project, it was 5,400 ton. The designer had it in his mind is 5,400 cubic yard. But he made the mistake, everybody missed it, nobody looked at it, the contractor did not. Because that's what they're looking at. They look at it, 5,400 cubic yard and ton, they double the quantity. If my cost is $10 and I bid it at 20, that's going to cost the UDOT a lot of money because that item is drastically overrunning. What do you put in your spec? It's very important because that's what the contractor is looking at. That's your way of communication with the contractor. You're telling them, this is what I'm going to do. This is what you can do. You cannot close the road on this time of the day to this time of the day. Make sure this is what really want to do, because if not going to happen, you're going to end up to that wall. The wall is going to be there because it's not time. You cannot give the contractor from 8 p.m. to midnight to build a job. You got to look at all those, and those are all in your constructability review. Can it be built in 6 hours and done in 2 months? No. So we got to look at that. One of the things we do on for UDOT, and after the project is open, the bid opening, before it's awarded, UDOT has a program which compares the low bidder, second low bidder, with the engineer estimate, the cost-based estimating we have there. We look at the items which could be some problem in future when you building it. If one contractor is bidding the item at $25, the other contractor is bidding it at $10, that's the raising a flag in here. Why? We notify the construction and the designers and tell them, why don't you check your quantity one more time to make sure this quantity is right, is not overrunning. Front loading. Contractor loves to work on UDOT money. Why should we spend our own money and wait for the pay estimate number one so we can go cover that cost? So they put the money on the items, is the front items. Look at your bid tab. You see all the items are going to happen at the end of the project are low. Anything is in the front of the project, it bid at high. Mobilization, most of the time, is 9.9% of the total project, because up to 10% is allowed. Lump sum item, survey, cost them 10 grand. They put $200,000 there. First pay estimate, they get 25%. Traffic control. The structures, usually you see the lower number, because the structure is always at the end. So those are the stuff we look for. We find something, we report it to the construction. Decision of the construction is whatever they decide. If they feel there is the unbalancing in the project or front loading, they apply the spec of UDOT, whatever the specs allow them to do, question the contractor, some cases reject the contractor. Because it doesn't mean they were low bidder at the bid time, they're going to be the low bidder at the end. Because if the items are overrunning and they unbalanced to it, at the end of the project, that project is going to cost UDOT 10 times higher.
All right, my name is Jason Henry. I'm the manager of UDOT Estimate Support. I've been working with UDOT for over 7 years now to help improve cost estimating here at UDOT. My background is project management and roadway design. Okay, so as far as when to leverage this on your projects, the answer is, clear through your project. You might be wondering why during concept. The thought is the contractor perspective during concept is really valuable in identifying and quantifying risks. So it'll help your project teams make sure they get the project kicked off in the right direction as far as funding-wise. The last three, pre-construction, bid award, and construction, I think have been pretty obvious after this discussion. During design, it helps make the design better, of course. During bid award, it helps make sure there's no bids out there that would be to the detriment of the department. And of course, during construction, it's a great help with change orders. So, just being a former roadway designer, just a bit of advice here, just a thought. During the design phase, as a roadway designer, I think I would appreciate the support more earlier during the design phase, probably around plan in hand. One of the things I lived in fear of as a designer was getting to PS&E and having somebody come up with a really great idea that I hadn't thought of and having to change my design, because it killed my design budget, it killed my design schedule, and it killed the morale of my design team too. So we're recommending, if you get the support, once again, at plan in hand, it'll help your designers make sure they've got all these ideas while the design's still fluid. And it'll really help your designers enjoy what they're doing more. Okay, so the how. Here's a couple ideas. So the thought here is that the cost-based estimators integrate with your project teams. It's about teamwork. The thought is they come to your review meetings, they participate in your key decision meetings. They're there for you to, talk things through, to review your plans. They're really good about asking some leading questions to get the designers thinking, to make sure that you've kind of thought about everything from a contractor's perspective. And of course, they come up with some great recommendations. As far as the communication, I mean, I think back to my roadway design days, I spent hours racking my brain with my project team, which was a bunch of other engineers, trying to decide the best way to design something. I would have killed to be able to pick up the phone and call a contractor that really cared. I mean, because you can call contractors, but they're usually busy, you know, and they don't really want to talk too much. But in this situation with these resources, we can call them and get some good advice to help make those tough decisions so that we're not redoing the design later on. One thing that these resources are really good at, besides, of course, helping make your projects better, is they're engaged in also making your designers better, too. It's one of their goals is we're working with the designers, you know, from whatever company, whatever region, to help them be better, to help them see things, you know, through a contractor's eyes. One thing they really like to do is to take designers out to the field and just walk the project, drive the project, and help them see it through the eyes of a contractor. Because I promise, just being a roadway designer, I mean, cool, we've got cool engineering superpowers and all that, but these guys have some really cool perspectives that we don't have. And that's the whole point of this, is that perspective just adds a lot of value to projects. Okay, so the who, you've kind of met Abdi and Chris. Of course, they're former construction project managers and cost estimators. They've got great relationships with all the suppliers around here, the subcontractors, so they can help get you guys a good cost for your project. And the icing on the cake is not only are these guys really intelligent and smart, they're also really fun to work with. I mean, I don't think I've ever laughed so hard the last few years as working with these guys. I mean, they're just total characters. Randall Taylor, he's the point of contact for all the cost estimating in Region 4. Randall's got some contractor background. He's worked with Chris and Abdi for the past couple of years, and he's doing a good job down there. So if you're working on some Region 4 projects, he's kind of your point of contact. So just to kind of wrap this up in conclusion, having the contractor perspective on your team, however you get it on your team, will really help you guys deliver your projects more smoothly and more efficiently, and it'll help you save money while you're doing it. And I'd also suggest in there it'll help you have more fun doing it. I mean, if you can avoid surprises later on in a project, you're always having more fun. If you know that you're producing one of the best designs you can, you're always having more fun. And it really helps your project look better too. So I've seen this perspective work wonders on quite a few projects. It's been really amazing over the years. And I just invite you guys to use it on your projects as it makes sense to you. So with that, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. And I think at this point we're going to take some questions if you guys have any.
What percentage of your bid items do you use cost-based estimating on?
20% of the items make up 80% of the cost. But is your question, when they're bidding, which line items do they actually do cost-based estimating on?
That would be part of it, yeah.
Basically, when the projects comes, the major items, we look at it. If it's a reconstruction, you basically have your mobilization, traffic control is always there. And then you have your excavation, your granular borrow, your road base, your asphalt, and your concrete. Those are the items which majority of the cost is there. So we estimate those. And then we look at the minor items just to make sure the items is in line.
What do you use for costs on those?
I have a system myself. What I do is we keep track of the bed tabs. We know what the numbers are. I usually do what the Federal Highway does too and practice it. I drop the low bed, I drop the high bed, I average the middle. Reason is low bed bet the job to get the job. High bed didn't want a job, just bet it to keep the low bid and the others honest. The middle are the one they're looking at the fair market for that project. So that's what the number I use.
This is average unit bid prices?
Is my average unit prices, not the posted UDOT average prices, because I don't personally never like the average prices, because average prices is good for information, is not accurate cost.
So Brandon, let me suggest something here, which maybe one of the answers to your questions is, it takes a lot of experience from someone who has estimated a project to win it, as well as, sometimes just to keep it honest, right?
That's right.
So that's kind of where a perspective from UDOT, we're getting some good knowledge in here.
Okay. Another question is, what kind of software tools are available to help with cost-based estimating?
It's a great question, and right now we use Oman software. And just a real quick story, our construction folks came to us. Yep. Our construction folks came to us and basically said, what can our REs use as a tool to have costs available? And they said, let's use the Oman software so that we'd be able to get a better idea of what those costs would be, kind of like Abdi was talking about earlier. So we sat down, and we're fortunate that in Region 4, Randall Taylor works for UDOT, and he's been using this software. And when he sat down, he said, look, it's taken me a year and a half. And in that year and a half, now I'm finally comfortable of using the software, and I can estimate prices relatively well and is doing a great job. But even with that said, he's still calling Chris and Abdi to find out, are these costs reasonable? Are these equipment production rates reasonable? Is the timing reasonable? And things like that. So I think there's a lot of software out there to use. That's what we use, but it's not something you just sit down and start using one day.
Average unit price is good to use, but you gotta make a judgment on it. Average statewide is from southern Utah to northern Utah, east to west. But that doesn't mean that's the cost of the project, because it depends where the material is coming from. It depends how much haul distance you have, what is the availability of the equipment, the timing of the project. These are affecting every single project. Every single project has a different price. There is no two projects are same. You might come average close to it, but it's not the same price. Every project is different. Contractor bid every single job.
Does anyone know why DOTs use average unit bid prices? It's because we have the data. So almost all DOTs, they have that data with them. They've done all the bids, they've got all the awards, they've got all the data, so it's easy to average. But like Abdi was saying, it's not necessarily always an indicator of what that average unit bid cost is, because of the nature of whether it's location or whether it's the environment that's being bid or whatever. It's probably good in some circumstances, but when the market changes, the cost-based estimating is probably where you're going to get the advantage, because you're seeing that change rather than waiting for those average unit bid prices to catch up.
Okay. My last question is, you talked about getting involved at the scoping phase of a project, but usually the scoping phase, it's concept phase, so that generates a concept report, but then design is awarded to somebody, whether it's in-house or consultant design. When you enter into the design network for your kickoff, your scoping meeting, at what point should cost-based estimating be involved? And because to me, plan in hand seems a little late at that milestone. You probably want to be having cost-based estimating involved during the plan in hand phase.
So that's a great question and a great comment. And essentially what's happened was, we started this about 2 years ago. And when we started it, it was made mandatory, but we were doing it at the advertising stage, which is way too late. I think that the department has gained a lot of confidence in using this method, and so now we're getting it earlier. Ideally, like you said, it's at concept, and then even at scoping, because at that point, when you have the entire team, meaning construction, maintenance, and design involved in a meeting, you may find out that the project value is a certain amount, but you need other things like drainage or something like that that's not in the scope. But if you have a really good estimate of what the project's going to cost, then you can adjust your scope accordingly. It may be up, it may be down. So the earlier the better, and we're just getting to the point where we're getting the department more comfortable with using this methodology earlier in the project. So I'd say, to answer your question, probably it's scoping. But part of that is, we've got a lot of projects, and starting it that early doesn't always happen.
I guess I do have a follow-up question on that. Should cost-based estimating be used on every project that UDOT advertises?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Actually, it is happening. It might not happening at the consulting or the designers. When we get involved, we have that information and we estimate every single project. Over 350, 400 project is already estimated, is in the database of the Almen estimating. So we do estimate every single project. And that's available as your request. We do the constructability review, we do the cost base, and we make our recommendation. And sometimes we ask to change on the common resolution, we ask you to change it to this if it's doable for you, department.
And to kind of further that, I don't know if your question was, should it be or not? We do it on every single project, no matter what. So unfortunately, there are some projects where we don't realize that these guys haven't been involved until advertising. But it's still cost-based estimated, because when we get to the construction phase, then there still may be negotiations or some other things that will give the department the ability to have the accurate prices when we negotiate with contractors.
Change order negotiation during construction, at what point should resident engineers or field engineers contact you guys for assistance with change orders?
These guys are pretty much available all the time, and here's what I usually say. From 5 a.m. till midnight, it's Chris and Abdi. From midnight till 5, it's Jason. So, anytime you need to contact them, you can. I think probably the classic example was, and I don't remember what project it was, but it was
the project up the
I-80?
SR 248, but by I-80 up there in the summit.
Yeah, Tony Lau was the resident engineer. And it was Saturday night, it was 7 o'clock, and he needed to make a decision by midnight, and called Abdi and said, hey, I need some costs, I need some price, and I need some advice on how to address this. And, they kind of worked it out in a couple of hours. Abdi sent him some information, and, it ended up making the negotiation good for both parties. So to answer your question, it's kind of any time, but the earlier is always better. Once you've got a change order, you should be starting to work on it immediately so that you don't get into a time crunch.
Try not to make us the critical path.
Yeah, Chris just said try not to make the critical path be here. But, again, if it's the last minute and you need some help, these guys are available to help you.
Yeah, I had a question. Jeff Ray, also with Parsons, and I've been working with Chris and Abdi on some projects, and extremely useful and greatly appreciated. As we watch construction projects being bid, often we're very surprised at the bid prices that come back. They range from 50% to even contractors themselves are 100% different from each other. Can you speak to your history regarding how closely the cost-based estimating matches the awarded construction cost?
I'll give a perspective and then let Abdi answer it, but every single project's different. And what I mean by that is when you bid it, who's bidding it, and where it's bid. So at the beginning of the year, contractors are trying to get contracts. So they may bid it differently than if it's in August or something, where they have to consider different how they're going to use their equipment, how they're going to use their labor, if they have it all filled up or not. So those are some of the things that are taken into consideration. But I'll let Abdi give his perspective on that.
In general, nobody can read the contractor's mind. I work in the contracting business for 40 years, And my main concern always at the estimator, or project manager, chief estimator, whatever you want to name it, was I don't want to leave money on the table, but I don't want to lose this job. I need to meet my budget. I need to get backlog so I can keep my equipment and people busy. So early season, you see different numbers than the late. But you still see a difference because some contractors get the jobs early season, some hasn't. So by the time you get to the August time, for example, the contractor who picked up the jobs in May, June, they're going to raise the markup because they already have the backlog. They're good for the year. They always can have more. But the contractor B or C has not. They make a lot of deals, contractor with the suppliers, with the oil suppliers. So you never know what exactly the number is going to be. Our almond estimating, when we estimate, we probably send you some, we give you the fair market price. We give you your estimate there, we give you the fair market price. Fair market price is the price UDOT should pay to build that job. Then we also predict the low bid. Because we look at the project and we're saying, okay, this project is closer to the contractor A. So they have an advantage. We look at the history of how they bid in the jobs. But you're right. When you open the bid and you look at one contractor is bidding at $50 per ton for the asphalt, the other one is $75, average price is $80, and we predicting at $68. So you never match. That answer your question. You cannot base on what the other contractors bid the items. All they do, cover your cost the best you can, put the reasonable markup on it, cross your finger, you the low bidder.
And do we have a history maybe of how close are we to the awarded construction cost?
So Federal Highways has a measure that we always look at, and we call it home run percentage. And what that means is if the awarded amount is between 90 and 110% of the engineer's estimate, that's what we consider a home run. The Federal Highways have said we need to be 50% of those projects, need to be in that range. 2 years ago, we were at 20 some odd percent, and that's historically where we've been. But we've raised that well into the 40s, and in some of the regions, we're in the 50s. Kind of going back, there's a little bit of a flaw with the way that is because these are being bid as the fair market value for the project. But the contractors are bidding it to win the project. So we're expected to be in the middle of where the contractor's price is, but we're being evaluated on really the low bid. So there's a little bit of a flaw there, but I would say right now we're very, very high on projects that are over $1 million. We're probably well over 60% on those, maybe even higher. Where we tend to struggle is the $500,000 and less, and it's really because we could put more effort into it, but is the effort to get $200,000 project right on $200,000 worth it, or do we just look at it and say, if we're well over it, are we really going to award this project or not? So it becomes a struggle on your question of how close we are because there's a real big dynamic between the small projects and the big projects.
Very good. As I said, I've worked with Abby and Chris, and very helpful, and I've appreciated it.
Thank you. We've been doing this now for about 2 years. It's been really helpful from the perspective of, like we were just talking about from your question, where before, from being in that 90 to 110% range, we were really, really low. We just were not hitting projects. And now, the bigger projects we're hitting all the time. Where that's helpful really is in the efficiency of how the department works, meaning if we know where our dollars are going, then we can spend them more wisely. If we've got projects that are wildly overestimated, then that means we've got money that are not in other projects. So it's good both for the department and for the contracting community. So we intend to keep going in this direction, but not just with the engineers' estimates, but as we talked today, with the support in the construction side and also in constructability. So with that, if there are no more questions, thank you very much for coming, and this will be posted online, so if you'd like to look at it, it should be under our U.U. Thank you.